Hello everybody, my name is Lica and I'm a PhD student at KU Leuven in Belgium. First of all, I would like to thank you for having me here, for your time and attention, and especially to the organizers for putting together such an ambitious and thought-provoking congress whose general topic, the intersection of intellectual property and public interest, is very close to my heart, as it is very much aligned with my own doctoral research. I would like to start this presentation with a general affirmation. Throughout the duration of public health events, such a pandemic, the public's attention is generally aligned with matters of public interest. However, at times, certain vital pieces of the jigsaw, which are of crucial importance for the resolution of the public health emergency, are sometimes neglected by the public and do not transcend in the media. The question is why? And that's what we're going to discuss today. For example, throughout the evolution of the global COVID-19 pandemic, much of the public attention has been mainly turned towards the troubled waters related to intellectual property. I will mention 3 topics out of many, which caused great turmoil, especially in the press. The first example was the contractual and verbal arm wrestling between governments and pharmaceutical companies, as it was the case with AstraZeneca and the European Commission on the timely delivery of vaccine doses. A second such example was and is the distribution of these vaccines within countries and between countries, with a palpable gap between the North and the South. A third example was the heated debate on the feasibility of a waiver on related IP rights. I'm of course referring to the South Africa and India's communication proposing a waiver for certain provision of the TRIPS agreement for the prevention, containment, and treatment of COVID-19, topic which I'm certain will be discussed more than once during this Congress. However, interestingly, another exchange of uttermost importance, beyond IP, but on which IP relevant to COVID-19 pandemic relies, has been left somewhere out of the limelight, outside the sphere of public attention. I'm talking about pathogen sharing, which is actually the main topic of this discussion. As a matter of fact, pathogen sharing, for example, SARS-CoV-2 causing COVID-19, this sharing among laboratories is crucial, as it is the first link within the chain of development of diagnosis, vaccines, therapeutics, but also as a sine qua non for the swift tracking of mutations across regions. Despite its acknowledged relevance in upstream research for the subsequent creation of relevant IP, pathogen sharing during the COVID-19 pandemic has been tacitly taken for granted in the backstage of science happening and remain out of the public eye. Why is it so? Is it so because it works smoothly and according to a protocol? If not, what are the causes? And should it be further neglected? My first hypothesis is that the relative silence surrounding pathogen sharing during COVID-19 pandemic can be explained by the lessons learned in prior public health emergencies, which imbued the exercise of pathogen sharing between laboratories and countries with at least a certain framework and render it less chaotic. Not perfect, but at least workable. For instance, in 2016, thus a few years before the COVID-19 pandemic unfolded, but as a direct consequence of the Ebola and Zika public health emergencies, the World Health Organization built momentum around the topic of pathogen sharing. How? With 2 key publications. One of them was guidance for managing ethical issues in infectious diseases outbreaks, whereby it declared the moral obligations of scientists to share data in the context of public health emergencies. The same year, so in 2016, the World Health Organization also issued a policy statement on data sharing in the context of public health emergencies, where it advocated for the pathogen genome sequences to be publicly available, to be made publicly available as rapidly as possible. In 2018, a draft code of conduct for open and timely sharing of pathogen genetic sequence during outbreaks of infectious disease was equally issued by the World Health Organization with the aim of harmonizing this sharing exercise on several levels. I'll mention just a few. For example, the timeliness of sequencing, the sample export where local capacity to sequence is insufficient, or the early public disclosure of pathogen genetic sequence data during each outbreak, followed by journal publication. Despite the good intentions, despite the code of conduct never being formally adopted, it at least provided a crucial framework, structuring learnings from past experience with pathogen harmful to humans. Well, and now we reach the second part of my presentation. My second hypothesis as to why pathogen sharing, despite being a matter of public interest, has not attracted much of the public attention during the COVID-19 pandemic is the following. In general, we tend to think of pathogens as falling within the category of global commons, pertaining to nobody, as they do not know of borders or nationalities. As such, pathogen sharing should happen within strict protocols, but without any legal obstacles. A very interesting article on this topic has been written by Tesadze Minteo. However, the assumption we just made is not totally correct. A strict reading of the UN Convention on Biological Diversity and the Nagoya Protocol to such convention, both being international legal instruments seeking to counter the misappropriation of genetic resources of countries and associated traditional knowledge, leads to pathogens generally falling under the umbrella of genetic resources. What are genetic resources? Article 15 of the UN Convention on Biological Diversity states the following. Recognizing the sovereign rights of states over their natural resources, the authority to determine access to genetic resources rests with the national governments and is subject to national legislation. So, as such, pathogen sharing and their quality of genetic resources pertain to the country of origin. The country of origin has thus the capacity A. to consent to its genetic resources being accessed, B. on mutually agreed terms, and C. covering access and benefit sharing arrangements, also known as ABS arrangements, for benefits issued from such utilization. The fact that the country of origin has the capacity to consent to its pathogen samples being accessed also implies the country an ability to both restrict such access to samples, genetic sequence, and epidemiological data. This is not new. It happened actually in 2007 when Indonesia declined access to World Health Organization to H5N1 influenza samples, but also in 2012 with Saudi Arabia's sovereign claims over MERS-CoV. This is the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome coronavirus. A very interesting article by Michel Roque and report by the Georgetown University Medical Center reflect respectively these two cases. The language used by both countries, this is by Indonesia and by Saudi Arabia, managed to instrumentalize and reframe the language employed by the UN Convention on Biological Diversity to legally restrict access to such pathogens in a narrative move qualified as viral sovereignty. If the outbreak in China was not accompanied by any such sovereign claims, though the lack of transparency on the origins of the pandemic has been very much criticized, it is worth understanding the public health implications of the implementation of the Nagoya Protocol. This public health implications of the implementation of the Nagoya Protocol is also the title of a report issued by the World Health Organization in 2021. Why is it so important? Because it underlines the effect of the Nagoya Protocol during the COVID-19 pandemic and also on pathogen sharing of efforts. On the one hand, the sharing of the physical samples of SARS-CoV-2 was acknowledged to be easier where bilateral agreements between institutions specifying Nagoya Protocol access and benefit sharing arrangements were already in place, and also where researchers knew and trusted each other. For example, via the Global Health Security Initiative. The Pandemic Influenza Preparedness framework, also called PIP framework, built to counter Indonesia's viral sovereignty claims regarding H5N1, which we discussed previously, also proved to be very useful throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. The WHO established the WHO COVID-19 Reference Laboratory Network with clear guidelines as to the use of the virus and its access and benefit sharing arrangements. However, when those bilateral agreements were missing, or specific regulatory frameworks or material transfer agreements affecting both parties were not in place, this had a very negative impact on the speedy sharing of genetic sequence or samples. And in public health emergencies such as the COVID-19 pandemic, delays cost lives. What is more, the landscape was further complicated by the lack of harmonized systems across countries and unclear national guidelines, situation which was aggravated by recipient laboratories unaware or uncompliant with the Nagoya Protocol access and benefit sharing arrangements. And it's precisely here, when timeliness can save lives, that public scrutiny, detached, unconcerned by pathogen sharing, should reconsider its position. On the one hand, the public should be aware that viral sovereignty can strike at any time in the future, with serious consequences for upstream research. On the other hand, more pressure is needed to achieve the successful operationalization of Article 8b of the Nagoya Protocol, which seeks, in cases of emergencies that threaten or damage human, animal, or plant health, to allow expeditious access to genetic resources and expeditious, fair, and equitable sharing of benefits, including access to affordable treatment by those in need, especially in developing countries. Well, with this, I reach the end of my presentation, and I thank you very much for your attention. My email, if you have any questions regarding my presentations, my presentation is the following. Diana Maria.Lica, Lica, at Leuven.be. I thank you again very much.